Evander walked briskly through the quiet streets, the girl's small hand clutching his as they approached the steps of the city's East Ward shelter. The flickering neon sign above the door barely cut through the heavy fog. Inside, he could see movement, volunteers and tired faces milling about in the warm light.
This is where you'll be safe.
Evander said softly, crouching in front of the girl.
They'll look after you here.
Her wide, tear-streaked eyes locked onto his.
Will you come back?
Evander hesitated. He stopped, glancing over his shoulder. The alley where he'd fought the creature was now just a smear of darkness, but its last words clawed at his mind.
You don't know what you're fighting.
Yeah,
He finally said.
I'll check on you. I promise.
She nodded slowly and let go of his hand, stepping hesitantly through the door. A volunteer, a wiry man in a gray sweater, knelt to meet her, throwing Evander a suspicious glance. The door clicked shut, leaving him alone with the fog in his thoughts. Evander tugged his coat tighter and set off toward his office, his staff tapping rhythmically against the wet pavement. The streets felt different tonight, colder, quieter. The faint glow of streetlights barely reached the shadows between the buildings, and every flicker of movement on the edge of his vision put him on edge. By the time he reached the building, the tension in his shoulders had turned into a headache. He unlocked the door, stepped inside, and flicked the switch. The overhead light buzzed once, then blinked out.
Perfect.
Evander muttered. He waved a hand, muttering a short spell under his breath. The room filled with soft blue light as a sigil flared to life on the ceiling, illuminating the mismatched furniture and cluttered desk. He dropped his coat onto the back of a chair and sat heavily, pulling the envelope from his pocket. It was as pristine as ever. The Vexward crest gleamed faintly, its crescent moon cradling a sun. No scratches, no damage, just like the fight had never happened.
You've got some explaining to do.
Evander murmured, placing it on the desk. His thumb brushed the wax seal, but it didn't budge. He'd tried every spell he knew to open it, and nothing had worked. His eyes flicked to the journal sitting next to the envelope, a faded, leather-bound book that had belonged to his parents. It was one of the only things they'd left behind when they vanished. He flipped it open to a page covered in diagrams and faint, scrawled notes.
Same crest,
he muttered, comparing the intricate sketches in the journal to the one on the envelope.
Same family, same puzzle. What am I missing?
The sigil above him flickered and Evander froze. The room grew colder, the faint light dimming as an unnatural whisper filled the air.
They weren't wiped out,
the voice said, faint and teasing.
they vanished.
Evander jumped to his feet, his staff in hand.
Who's there?
The whisper came again, closer this time.
You don't belong.
The light in the sigil sputtered and died, plunging the room into darkness. Evander spun toward the window just as the glass shattered inward. A dark shape lunged at him, claws slashing through the air. He ducked, rolling to the side as the creature landed heavily on his desk, scattering papers and knocking over the envelope. It snarled, its eyes glowing faintly yellow in the gloom.
Another one of you?
Evander growled, gripping his staff tightly.
Didn't get the memo, huh?
The creature didn't respond. Its form flickered like the last one's, but this one was bulkier, its movements heavier. It leapt from the desk, its claws aimed for Evander's throat. He swung his staff, the wood colliding with the creature's side. Magic flared along the staff, sending the creature crashing into a filing cabinet. Evander barely had time to catch his breath before another figure stepped through the broken window. This one was humanoid, cloaked in shadow, its face obscured. It didn't lunge like the first. It stood still, watching.
Evander Vexward.
The figure said, its voice low and distorted.
You're meddling in things beyond your understanding.
That's becoming a theme tonight?
Evander shot back, keeping one eye on the first creature as it climbed back to its feet.
Care to elaborate?
The figure didn't answer. Instead, it raised a hand, and the air grew thick with energy. A sigil appeared on the floor beneath Evander, glowing faintly red. He swore under his breath and jumped back, narrowly avoiding the magic as it erupted upward in a column of fire.
I'm not big on traps,
Evander said, raising his staff. Blue light flared at its tip as he released a pulse of energy toward the shadowy figure. The blast hit its target and the figure staggered, its form flickering, but it didn't fall.
You should have stayed in the shadows, Vexward.
The figure said.
You won't find answers, only death.
Evander darted to the side as the first creature lunged again. It moved more erratically now, its flickering form barely holding together. He swung his staff low, knocking its legs out from under it, then drove the end of the staff into the floor. A pulse of magic surged outward, knocking both attackers back. The shadowy figure slammed into the wall, its cloak dissolving into smoke. The remaining creature writhed on the ground, its form distorting as though it were being pulled apart. Evander didn't wait to see what happened next. He grabbed the envelope from where it had fallen and bolted for the door, his staff glowing faintly in his hand. As he reached the street, Evander paused, catching his breath. He turned back toward his office just in time to see the sigil on the ceiling glow red and then collapse inward, taking the entire building with it. For a moment, the world was silent. Then the whispers came again.
They weren't wiped out. They vanished.
Evander tightened his grip on the envelope and stepped into the shadows. Whatever was coming, he wasn't ready for it, but he didn't have a choice.